I got a lot of perks. I got a lot of perks writing. Magazines didn't pay much money. But I got some great perks. I got trips to almost all the islands. The French West Indies, the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, the Galapagos Islands. Great perks. Now, the magazine never paid for it. The PR companies pay for it, and then the hotel kicks in the hotel. So anyway, the greatest perk of all came in 1984 when I spoke before the Greater Fort Lauderdale Shipwreck Symposium. And my topic was against state interference in treasure salvage. Now, most of the audience consisted of wreck divers and salvers, and there were the officials from the state of Florida were there. Mel Fisher was in the audience. Now, Mel Fisher is probably one of the world's most famous treasure salvers, in that he found the $400 million treasure of the Etosha in 1985. My talk lambasted the state of Florida and all of its bureaucratic regulations. 4 or 5 years prior to that, the state of Maryland had seized Mel Fisher's treasure, took it to Tallahassee. He didn't get back for 5 years. He got it back by going to the Supreme Court. He won in the Supreme Court. The treasure came back to him from Tallahassee. Some of it was missing. But the state continued to harass him, but not as much, because he had that Supreme Court ruling in his favor, but they still kept making up rules. They made up the Abandoned Shipwreck Act, and they made up lots of legislation. So here's what happened. I finished my talk, gave it to him really good. I got mostly applause because there were salvers and recreational divers in the audience. Mel Fisher comes up to me and he says, "That was a great talk." He says, "If I had been up there, that's exactly what I would have said." I thought, if you're going to do it, you better do it now. Mel, I said, "I've always wanted an honest-to-goodness, real silver piece of 8. But I can't afford the $500. Could you sell me one at a discounted rate?" He said, "See me at the Lobster Luau tomorrow night on the beach in front of the hotel that ends up the conference." So I went up to him and I said, "Mel, you told me to remind you about buying a silver piece of 8. With that, he reaches around and he unhooks the gold chain from around his neck and he slides off this beautiful silver coin in a gold bezel, and he hands it to me and he says, "You can have this."
Oh, wow.
I said, I can't take your coin. I can't take your coin. The gold bezel on it. He let out this uproarious laugh and he says, "Don't worry about it. I've got 200 more home in the basement." When I got home, $1,500 in 1984 in a gold bezel. He said, and then after he left, he said, I just ran into my souvenir shop in the museum and grabbed it out of the glass case to wear so that I would look like an official salver. And that's Mel. That was Mel. That was typical of Mel Fisher. A heart of gold. A heart of gold. California wreck divers. A hardy group. They dive those California wrecks. They don't dive other wrecks, man. They dive hardy wrecks off California, and they bring up all kinds of artifacts, and they preserve them, and they have them out on display at their dive shows and in museums, and they do a wonderful job. And I was their featured speaker. They flew me out there, and I was their featured speaker. And there's a head table. I'm at the head table. There's about 200 of them, men and women, and I'm at the head table, and dinner's being served, and they had a program. I'm looking out, and I noticed there's a lot of sociability going on. A lot of chatter, a lot of talk. Which was fine. The dinner progressed, and near the end of the dinner, the president gets up to speak. Not going to say a lot. Hardly anybody's listening to him. The vice president gets up to speak. They're still socializing. Hardly anybody's listening to him. The artifact guy's going to give out the awards for the artifact. He gets up. They listen to him a little bit more, but they're still socializing. They've done dinner now. And I look out and I notice, gosh, there are a whole bunch of wine bottles on all the tables. And I turned to the guy next to me and I says, "You certainly are pretty hearty wine drinkers." And he says, "Oh yeah, that's because the wine is free." Wayne, don't get any ideas. The wine is free if they buy 12 raffle tickets. The raffle hadn't come off yet. And he says, "And besides, one of our divers, he's a distributor for the local wine company. We get this wine dirt cheap." And I look up, and the waitress is coming. She's got more wine. And I'm looking at the program. There's 12 things to be raffled off. The manufacturers had donated all this diving equipment. And I'm the last one up. And my heart's skipping a beat. I'm starting to panic. They're not going to hear a word I'm saying. I'm going to be dead man out, dead man walking. And so, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I got an idea. It's either going to work or it's going to flop. I don't think there's any in between. So here's what I did. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here today. And I am going to tell you one of the most dramatic stories that you have ever heard in your entire life. It's a true story. It comes out of World War II. It has to do with Pearl Harbor, and it's about Ralph Briggs. Now, I usually tell this story near the end of my talk, so my idea in training was move it up and get the dramatic story going. My story is about Ralph Briggs. I met Ralph Briggs through the mail. Ralph Briggs was retired, a naval officer retired in Las Vegas, and he saw an article I wrote about the Japanese two-man submarine that was raised out of Pearl Harbor in the 1980s and refurbished, and he knew I had some photos that went with my article, and he wanted to borrow the photos, so he said, "Can I borrow them, and I'll send them back to you. I'm putting together a book of photos from Pearl Harbor." Fine, yes, I sent them to him. Ralph Briggs was the commanding, now, not many people know this story, and that's how I got these people into it. I said, and this is true now, not many people know this story because it came from Ralph Briggs and it's not in any of the books. Ralph Briggs was the commanding officer of the Naval Communications System in Washington, D.C. in 1941, and he worked in a building on a top floor with a crew, and they had the top floor, and on the roof they had all this equipment to decipher codes. They were all cryptographers, and they deciphered codes, and they had all this on the roof. They had all these antennas and all this radio, all this technology. And Ralph Briggs told a story of how 2 days he knew what he was looking for. He was probably one of the top cryptographers in the country. He knew what he was looking for. He knew what was going to come across. If it came across, he knew it was going to be, one of the most bizarre things. Winds, code, execute. Winds, code, execute. East wind, rain was what he was looking for. Boom, it came across 2 days before Pearl Harbor, and it meant, number one, all relationships between the Japanese and the United States are going to be severed, and number two, there's going to be attack on Pearl Harbor. He wrote it all down in his logbook. He raced to his commanding officer. Now, this is true now. Ralph told me this. The commanding officer said, "You did it, Ralph. You hit it. We got it. We nailed it. I'll get this to the admiral immediately." Guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing came of it. The attack came on Pearl Harbor. Ralph was devastated. How could this happen? How could this happen? He raced back to his office to get the logbook to show everybody, and the page was torn out. He went to his commanding officer, and the commanding officer said, I command you not to tell anybody this story. You must not tell anybody, just let it go. Kind of smoothed it over by saying, Ralph, you've got your naval career to think about, and you've got your wife to think about. Ralph's wife was blind. Now, I want to tell you that except for what I'm going to tell you that Ralph Briggs told me, this story is in John Toland's book, Infamy, Pearl Harbor and its Aftermath. So if you get a chance to get it out of the library or Amazon, read it. Ralph Briggs is in there 6 different times. But what I'm about to tell you is not in there, and he never printed it. There were 10 congressional investigations. Ralph was never asked to come to any of them, and the commanding officer said, don't go to any of them, just let it go, Ralph, let it go. So I did sort of what I did with Mel Fisher by saying, well, are you going to ask him or are you not going to ask him? Ralph, I said, tell me what happened. What you think happened, they call them intercepts, the decode. What do you think happened to the intercept? He said, Ellsworth, he said, in my heart, I truly believe that FDR saw it. President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw it, he said, but he ignored it because he wanted us to go to war. And that comes from Ralph Briggs now. That's not in any of the books, because he was forbidden, he ordered not to say anything. That's not the end of the story. As I became good friends with him, he invited me, he became the head of a counterintelligence group of retirees, counterintelligence, Secret Service, FBI, and they met to a conference like this, and they met throughout the country, and he was coming from Las Vegas to Washington, D.C., and he invited me to be his guest at a luncheon, and I was so enthused and all ready to go. Ralph died 2 weeks before the convention, at age 84. So that was the sad part of the story of Ralph Briggs.